the missing ingredient when it comes to clear decision making under pressure. I'm sure you can relate personally, professionally, the responsibilities, the pressure, it can really bog you down. Let me share a little quick story here. So I remember asking my former husband a question. Why do you keep shouting? Like, why do you keep shouting and being so aggressive and using such foul language to try and bring me down? I'm like, why? Why do you do that? Name calling? Why? I was so frustrated. And I remember him saying this. Because that's when you listen. And that's when you do what you're told. Back then, this is like over a decade ago, I didn't quite understand what was going on within me because I complied. I conformed. In that very moment where there was a lot of tension, a lot of pressure, voice, tone off the roof, I didn't have the language to describe what I was experiencing, but I did feel under pressure. And maybe you can relate. It doesn't have to be in a marriage, it can be in any other situation. The pressure to comply, the pressure not to offend, the pressure not to get it wrong, to keep the peace, walking on eggshells. And under that pressure, I was still making decisions, right? I was still making decisions every day. But what kind of decisions? Were they clear? No, they were not clear. And they were not based on truth. And they certainly weren't sustainable in the long run. This is over a decade ago. So you see, over time, I began to notice something quite disturbing. When decisions are made under pressure, in that very moment, they feel right. Notice, and overcoaching hundreds and hundreds of individuals, CEOs, professionals, leaders, the trend doesn't change, right? So under that pressure, you make decisions. And those decisions actually look quite legit. They look quite logical in that very moment. They look responsible. They look reasonable. They feel necessary. Yet later, they leave this residue. They leave this sense of fatigue, this loss of self, this quiet building of resentment. And you also feel this sense that something, you're trading something off or you're trading something away, yourself. And the pattern doesn't only live in our personal lives, in our relationships. Look everywhere. In organizations. When you're trying to navigate, policy pressure. In leadership, in teams, squeezed by time, performance. Everyone looking at it from a different perspective, different lens, different stories, different narrative, different attachment of meaning. Even in founders carrying responsibilities for people, payrolls, survival, it's everywhere. History. Even when NASA launched the Challenger, it exploded just seconds after liftoff, right? And later investigations revealed that the engineers and the technicians knew that the bolts could not withstand the temperatures. They raised concern, they documented the risks, but under pressure, time pressure, performance pressure, reputational pressure, those warnings were ignored. And a blind eye was turned. Decisions were still made, right? Actions were still taken. But what kind? The quality. Not from clarity, for sure. You see, pressure does something. It quietly but dangerously clouds your lens. It clouds the perceptual grid. It narrows the perceptual grid. Decisions still happen, but pressure suppresses the thinking field in which clear thinking occurs. It suppresses the parts of the brain that are supposed to be functioning. The hippocampus, for example, the meaning-making part of the brain, contextual memory, distinguishing between what belongs now and what belongs later, all that is suppressed under pressure. So yes, you're still thinking, yes, you're still making decisions, but from a narrowed perceptual grid, from a suppressed functional brain, literally. So yeah, signals arrive from the external reality, right? Choices are still executed, but perception is so narrowed, meaning collapses. And what happens to thinking? Well, it becomes reactive rather than responsive. And this is why people under pressure usually avoid conversations. I avoided trying to rock the boat. I didn't want to get into conversations. They tell white lies just not to offend anybody. And then they confuse compliance with it's safe now. A client once shared this with me. He's very successful, the founder of a very successful company, admired professionally, but quietly drained personally. You know, and as much as there's love, his partner was easily triggered, and it felt like she wanted to control many aspects of his life. Out of love, of course, and to keep the peace, he avoided difficult conversations. And he made decisions that weren't true for him. He started to tell small white lies just to prevent, the emotional turmoil. And again, pressure. So, when did we see this again? Even during COVID, there was this fear-based meaning to what was happening. The restrictions, the urgency, the fear, the pressure not to do this, not to go there. There were so many constraints and restrictions. So yeah, decisions were made. That fractured relationships, that polarized and divided communities, eroded trust. Yeah, because people were under pressure, and pressure distorts perception. Pressure is with us every day, in every corner of our lives. Our personal life, our professional life, in society, in politics. And under pressure, what happens is the quality of our decisions decline. Even when our intentions, are good, the quality of our decisions and thinking decline. Because pressure is not a favorable condition for the hippocampus, for other parts of the brain. So what is missing? There are many things, but I want to focus on the most important, at least for me and from my observation. Presence. Without presence, we react. We have reactive leadership, reactive self-leadership. Yeah? The signals arrive from the external world, right? It could be a comment, a threat, an email, a demand, a deadline, something somebody said. The signals come in. And then the perceptual grid narrows. Then we react from fear, from urgency, from ego, without seeing the wider picture. So what presence does, it interrupts something in the process. And then something different happens. So when the signals come in, right? Instead of reacting, in presence, you notice. We notice the agitation. We notice this internal tightening. We notice. We notice the story forming in our minds. We notice. And then we pause. And pause may look like, just breathing, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, just creating space. It could be just stepping away for a minute. It could be asking some reflective questions, allowing time. And this is, not about avoiding responsibility. This is about restoring the conditions for thinking. Presence. And from presence, we can now re-render the meaning that our minds are trying to attach to these signals. And that way, we ask better questions. What am I missing here? What haven't I considered? What am I assuming here? What is this trying to reveal? Where is the gold in this constraint? You ask better questions. So within that presence, it loosens up the ego. The fear of looking foolish, the fear of getting it wrong, the fear of being judged, the fear of losing control. And what happens, it creates the conditions for clarity to return. There is this prayer that captures what I'm trying to say beautifully. I think it's called the Serenity Prayer. And it goes something like this. God grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things that we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. In presence, that's what allows the wisdom to emerge. That's what allows the wisdom to emerge. In my former marriage, for example, I could not control the other person's choices. As much as I wanted to, I could not. But I could control my environment. And clarity eventually required me to change my environment, which I did. That was more of a discernment. That was the wisdom. Under pressure, we fight reality. We fight what we cannot control. And in presence, we work with it. And when we do, creativity returns, innovation appears, options expand. The gold becomes visible. So, the missing ingredient to clear decision making under pressure, it's not the experience. Oh, I'm a leader for XYZ years, I have the experience. No. It's the shift from reaction to response. The shift that comes from a narrowed perception to presence, expanded clarity, wisdom. And from wisdom, you make clearer decisions. And only in presence can we recalibrate how we think. Only then can decisions emerge from truth and not fear or triggers. So, having said that, I have an invitation for you. Notice where pressure in your life is shaping your decisions right now. Notice. Notice where there's this urgency. And notice when that urgency, that pressure, clouded your thinking field. And notice next time what changes when you actually pause to recalibrate. Even briefly, this is the work of recalibration. The thinking field expands. And it begins way before you make a decision. presence.